ready to roll
with the troll.
We are talking about one of my favorite topics today. We are finally ranking all 8 of the films in the Rocky franchise.
I can't believe we haven't done it yet.
I know. Well, I kept thinking, like, that's kind of blowing our wad to me. This is one of the most... This is the topic that, especially if you're from my generation and you're a guy, especially if you're an Italian guy, you spent a lot of time with your buddies doing this.
Yeah.
And with each movie, you have to re-rank.
You have to re-rank.
Right? So we'll be doing this again in a few months.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Creed 3 is on its way right now. We're a few months away from Creed 3.
Nice.
So in a way, I thought we should wait for Creed 3 to rank. And on the other hand, I'm like, fuck it. We'll just re-rank in a few months once we have Creed 3. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we don't have much time. We got to dive right in here, okay? We're going to go from worst to best. Mm-hmm. What do you think my least favorite is?
Oh, one of those middle ones.
That's most people's.
Yeah.
Now, to me, my least favorite, well, actually, we don't really count this as one of the 8 movies, but I will tell you my least favorite is the recut of Rocky 4. But That's not really its own movie, right? It's just a recut. But that was a disaster.
We're not including that in the 8?
No, because it's 8 real films.
Okay,
not that. It's like counting an EP or a live album when you talk about a band's studio album. So you can't do that. So the recut of Rocky 4 would be my least favorite. And I have a bad feeling that the upcoming TV series would also be at the bottom of this list as well. But that's not even out yet. So let's leave that out of the equation.
Also not included.
So I'm going to start off with some blasphemy, guys. And I know I'm known for sarcasm and satire.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, my least favorite is the original Rocky film. Yeah.
Are you
the Oscar
serious?
winner? I'm not kidding. Yeah, the Oscar winner. I've maintained this forever. This is not like, okay, Troll's burned out on it because he's seen it so much. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's none of that. I've never thought that film was all that great.
Really?
And long story short, we'll talk more about it in a separate video. We'll just review it.
How did you get hooked on Rocky if the first film doesn't really cut it for you?
Well, I didn't say it didn't cut it. I'm just saying it's not my favorite. It's slow. There's a lot of unnecessary footage. That whole subplot of Paulie being this abusive alcoholic to his sister Adrian, and the whole it's really trying to be 2 movies to me. It's trying really hard to be a romance movie, and showing you how she has this hard life and Rocky has a hard life. So sometimes I feel like the boxing is very in the background. And then other times they try to put boxing right up in the foreground. And to me that didn't work. I think the movie's really amateur, and I do enjoy it. Obviously, it's a great movie still, but it does not even compare to the other films. I think when he went a little more Hollywood at the franchise and did better editing, I think the series got a lot better. So first film's great. It does not compare with the other ones to me.
All right.
More blasphemy. You ready for the number 7 on my list of 8?
Yes, I am.
Rocky Balboa.
Really?
Yeah. I know, that's kind of funny.
I love that one.
Well, and this one really is a tie between Rocky Balboa. It's all blasphemy with me on this list, okay? Between Rocky Balboa and the first Creed film.
Yeah.
Both of them could fight it out over who gets spot 7 and who gets spot 6. So I'll give you... Yeah, I know most people love it. These are the 3 that are at the top of most people's list, especially the casual fan. Not so much the hardcore fans like me, but for casual Rocky viewers, they all say the first Creed's amazing, the first Rocky's amazing, and I really love Rocky Balboa. In fact, I think that's where Stallone puts them too.
Yeah.
I think he said Rocky Balboa is his favorite, and I think the first film's his second favorite, and then he puts the first Creed up there as well.
Wow.
Look, they're all great movies. But they're all much more character exposition than I really want from this franchise. Like the intensity and the drama that comes with the films that are higher up on my list, it's more intense. And there's different reasons to love different movies, but the love stories in these 3 and I don't know. Let's talk about Rocky Balboa for a second. I do think this is a really great movie. I think it's significantly better than the original film, but and I really do like that you see Rocky teetering where he thinks the normal response to his time as a widower is to maybe, create this relationship. And then he's fighting it because he's like, no, who the fuck? I can't do that. Ultimately his heart's with Adrian no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really creative idea. I like that. But in the end, that fight, it went from being what should have been a simple exhibition to being just tremendous. And I think they could have gone even bigger with it. I think the drama could have been big. I think they could have made that last fight with Mason Dixon be a lot more interesting as like the other fights were in previous films.
Mm-hmm.
And instead he kind of traded that energy for making it look more real. He would really put a lot of effort into making it real. It was in front of a real audience for the first, a real boxing audience.
Yeah.
The other films they don't have that. In fact, they don't even really have much audience. They have like 10 rows of audience and then just a bunch of dummies. I don't know if you guys know that. But so, yeah, I think that film has a lot of problems. I'll tell you the biggest problem with Rocky Balboa is the guy who played Mason Dixon, Antonio Tarver, is not an actor, and it really shows. And, by the way, we'll talk about this in a separate video, but he actually held up Stallone for more money the night before the filming of that fight.
I remember this
right?
story.
Yeah. We'll get into a whole thing, but the point is his acting, his heart wasn't in it. He's not a good actor anyway. And that fucked part of the film to me.
Yeah.
There were a lot of little problems in this movie that were just very disjointed, poor editing. Stallone admits that he kind of rushed it. He didn't have much budget. So to me, all those problems really show in this movie. To talk a little bit more about the first Creed, very well directed. But there's little problems there. Like he's like 30 in the timeline. And he just kind of casually says, yeah, I'm going to have to go try to make it big and I'm going to quit my corporate job. And they just sort of glossed over that because it wouldn't happen that way at age 30. And it's, I know everyone's going to get pissed in the comments and say Stallone was 30 in the first film too. It was different. He didn't have a corporate job and he didn't come from money. He had nothing. And then for Donnie to do this, I think they glossed over a few things that they shouldn't have, and they spent a little too much time, like the other two on my list here. The first two I talked about, the other Rocky films. I think they spent too much time trying to focus on how Adonis, he wants to be this fighter and he's got this history and he was a violent kid and he's got anger. And I get all that. But then to make the leap and want to be a professional boxer at like what the math seemed to be about age 30, it's very weird to me. I didn't really buy it. I just thought it was a little too odd that he's just sitting at work one day and then he's like, to be a professional boxer, you have to have such a killer instinct and be such a savage. And when rich guys try to do it, it never works out well at all. They get the best trainers in the world. They get the best coaches. At the end of the day, you have to come from the streets like Rocky did. And so I had a pretty hard time with that. And the fact that he didn't want to use his name, I think there were so many doors they started to open and they didn't give me the drama on. So anyway, that's Creed 1. Great film. These are all, like every one of these films is like a 9.5 or a 10 to me. But again, I think this one was not as good as the others. All right, Rocky 2, next on my list. Remember Rocky 2?
Yeah.
This one was directed by Stallone. It was the first time he directed. And the critics kind of shit on him for that. And they said, you're not John G. Avildsen. You didn't do as good a job as the first film. I totally disagree. I think he kept the same directorial vision, but he improved on it. It was better editing. It was a more clear-cut story. We didn't keep sidetracking to Paulie's drunken behavior and weird comedy and just unnecessary things. So I thought Rocky 2 was an improvement. I also thought he handled the Adrian problem really well. There was a problem where because of her acting schedule, she wasn't going to be able to be in the scene for the final fight at the end. She wasn't going to be able to be in the stands.
Yeah.
And they kept trying to come up with creative ways to work it where she could look like she was in the stands when she wasn't. But there just was no way to get her schedule there, and they couldn't change the date of shooting the fight. So what he decided to do was to come up with this strategy, spoiler alert from a film that's 40 years old, to come up with a strategy where she had to stay home for doctor's orders, and then she's home with Paulie watching the fight.
Yeah.
And I thought, I bought it, even though that was a real crowbarred in kind of thing. So, look, there were a lot of good dramatic elements there, and I thought, I really felt like it was a proper continuation of the first film. The only little issue, too, was the retconning that I thought was funny, was Apollo specifically says in the first film, we ain't going to have no rematch. And then an hour later, he's like, we need a rematch, damn it. He wants to fight him like in the hospital. Remember that?
Yeah.
So that was a little strange. I thought it was pretty obvious there that they hadn't planned ahead for that and that was a little strange. But at least they addressed it. You know, they didn't pull a Cobra Kai where they just pretend it didn't happen. They addressed it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought Rocky 2 was a good way to continue on the franchise. And as much as people say the first film should have been left alone, I disagree. I think this really was a nice way to continue. All right, you ready for the real blasphemy?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's more?
Yeah. Rocky 5 is this high on my list. The next one is Rocky 5. I put it at number 4 out of the 8.
Wow.
It's a guilty pleasure. It's got the same kind of problems that I do think Cobra Kai has, where it's it's not really in the same universe as the other films. It's
Yeah.
a little too cheesy. It's a little too silly. There are moments I feel like, oh, why didn't they reshoot this scene? This is just not well done. But it has the most dramatic piece in the whole Rocky franchise to me. And I think a lot of people agree, even haters of this movie agree, that scene where Rocky has a flashback, which is not from a previous film, to Mickey. Remember that in the boxing ring?
Yeah.
And Mickey gives him the cufflink. And he's,
Yeah.
oh, I can watch that a million times. That's one of the most dramatic scenes. And I'm so glad he brought Burgess Meredith back. And that scene turned out so good in both versions of Rocky V, because I did see the screen, the alternate version too. That scene's different there. But either way, Rocky V, just full blown amazing. Absolutely love it. It's got its problems, but I still think at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure and it's a damn good movie and it's really fun. Creed 2, number 3 on my list.
Yeah,
Creed
now we're
2 is
getting
amazing.
to
Now we're
it.
talking. Creed 2 is amazing. I absolutely loved the direction here. You got to give the director credit because he had not done any of the previous films. I think he's a relatively new director anyway, but Creed 2 turned out perfect. To me, that had the intensity of my favorite 2, which we'll talk about in a second, and it was just a really good way to go. We'll review that one in a separate video too, but Creed 2 makes me think, gosh, this franchise is just as good as it's ever been.
Yeah.
All right, ready for my top 2?
Yes, I can't wait.
Well, they're pretty much a draw, but if I have to choose which one to be number 2 and which one to be number 1, I'm going to put Rocky 3 number 1 and Rocky 4 number 2. Just because Rocky 3 is more of a complete film. Rocky 4, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Rocky 4 is a little more of a short story to me. It's not a novel.
Yeah, I can see that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stallone was really getting cut crazy. Like he talked a lot about how he wanted just fast editing like crazy in Rocky 4. And he had done Rocky 2 had more fast editing than what the first film had. 3 was probably even a little more. But in 4, he really went nuts. He didn't want anybody getting bored at all. So he cut it down to this 90-minute movie. And it really is just fast going.
It is,
right? It's I keep comparing to Cobra Kai, but it's kind of the way Cobra Kai shoots. Like you never get a second to reflect on anything. It just goes.
Move.
Yeah. So that's kind of why I have to put Rocky 3 a little bit above it. Rocky 3 is more fleshed out. There's room to get boring if you're a casual fan, but I never got bored at all. I loved Rocky 3 top to bottom.
Yeah.
The intensity of those two films and the darkness of both of them, to me, was so well done. And you really got to give Rocky 3 credit because think about how ambitious this is for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Think of this story just on paper of him trying to sell it to somebody. Here's the pitch, right? He's got to convince somebody. No, in the third film, which guys, keep in mind, back then, a third film never went well, okay?
Right.
Superman 3 was a fucking mess. Godfather 3. If you tried a third film, it wasn't going to go over.
Yeah.
And yet this one, although the critics didn't like this, Rocky 3 is a story of a guy who's just losing his edge, losing his motivation, and then and finds out that his wins really aren't all that big of wins after all, and that now he's got to reclaim his inner self. That's a hard thing to show on film. The audience, the Hollywood audience, wants something more tangible.
Yeah.
You know? And this movie, although he does lose to Clubber the first time, so that's kind of tangible, and then Mick dies, so there's that.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. Like that scene on the beach where he's running against Apollo, they're having a race or something.
Yeah.
And then Rocky kind of just stops. That's a hard thing to shoot and to sell to a crowd. And yet I thought he nailed it. Like that scene breaks my heart every time where he just kind of stops and goes, we'll do it tomorrow. And he's talking like a loser.
Yeah.
And here's Apollo, who was the loser between the two of them.
Right.
And Apollo's telling him, the fuck's wrong with you, man? I'm paraphrasing.
Yes, you are.
But I think Rocky 3 is to just sit down for a movie that's really going to take you somewhere and move you. And I've sat down with so many friends who had never seen it. We watch it for the first time. Everybody says that's a great movie. That's just such a great movie. So,
Hands down, yeah.
Right? Rocky 3 is the best. Rocky 4 is close behind it, but a little too Hollywood and too cut up and not enough of the characters. And then again, we talked about all the others. So yeah, what do you think of my list?
Well done. I think I would have put the original Rocky higher on the list. But,
Everybody would, yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely agree with your top 3.
Well, everybody send me all the hate comments. Tell me how great the first film is and how I'm being a dick. Reword everything I'm saying. But most importantly,
hit the like button, please.
Yeah, you guys support the channel. Like, subscribe. We could really appreciate it. The channel's still struggling to really get afloat in the algorithm. So like, subscribe, ring the bell. Can't wait to see you guys for more Rocky and other movies coming up soon.